Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I'm your host, Kevin Armstrong, joined by my good friends, Peter Baracchini and Alex Hobson. We all are writers for the Hockey Writers, covering everyone's favorite team to love and hate, the Toronto Maple Leafs. And as promised, this has been quite a week. Nothing on ice, but we had an expansion draft and we had the entry draft. And there's been years in the past where Leaf fans have really had to, sit back and go, what's going to happen in this draft? Who's the future here? And you don't wait long. Well, this time we had to wait till round 2, pick number 57 for the Leafs to finally be on the board. As you may recall, that first overall pick was sent away for one Nick Foligno to come to the team for a cup of coffee. But anyway, we're going to talk about the draft. No more worrying about what's behind us, what's in front of us. And the best to look at that is draft day and 3 new players with Leaf jerseys. So let's start with Peter, actually, because Peter, this is kind of like Christmas for you. You do a lot of draft, and so does Alex as well, but you do a lot of draft, a lot of prospect watching throughout the year. So let's just start up with number 57 for the Leafs. What does that player bring to this team? And I'm also wondering how well he knows Austin Matthews.
Arizona kid, born and raised there. He has the same skating coach as Austin Matthews, so there's that connection right there. But yeah, 57th overall, Matthew Knies, committed to the University of Minnesota for 2021 and 22. So college bound, going to be a while before he gets to the NHL, but he has a lot of great tools considering his size. He's 6'3", 205 pounds. Considering that, a lot of fans were really happy because Kyle Dubas likes to go for the smaller 5'10", 5'11" kind of players, highly skilled. But Knies brings a lot more to the table than just his size. He's very aggressive on a forecheck. He has great speed given his size, a really great shot, hard drive to the net, getting into the gritty areas, always battling and not afraid to lay the body down at any moment. Basically, the comparison that I've seen watching the clips throughout the season and even right now is basically a more offensive version of a Zach Hyman. And we all know that Zach Hyman is on his way out. Not necessarily saying that Matthew Knies is going to come onto the top line and be Zach Hyman right away. That's ridiculous. But at the same time, he has a lot of the similar skill sets, same qualities, can play in any situation, very determined on every single shift that he plays. And again, a better shot and better hands on him. So they got someone who's capable of fitting in that middle 6 role. If not, then he's going to be providing a really solid depth option on a 3rd or 4th line, possibly in the future.
How far in the future are we talking about this type of player? Obviously not next year, as you said, and he is committed to Minnesota. So are we looking at a AHLer for the next, I don't know, when's he try on the big league Leaf jersey? 2-3 seasons?
It depends on how well his progression goes. He had a slow start in the USHL, but he progressively got better, and the Maple Leaf scouting department was really high on him, and they really liked what they saw with his progression throughout the year. I'm going to be safe, and I'm going to say at least maybe 4 or 5 years until we see him in possibly the AHL. Again, it all depends on how well his progression goes with his developments. How long he stays in university, it depends, but he's got a lot of options ahead of him right now, and I don't think the Maple Leafs are going to rush him at any point.
Alex, anything to add to that number 57 pick, or do you want to move on to the next round?
No, I mean, if I can say one thing to all the Leaf fans watching right now, and if I could create a selling point with one sentence, it's just to echo what Peter said. He is a bigger Zach Hyman with a better shot. And I've seen most of the scouting outlets that I saw had him ranked essentially right around where the Leafs took him, which was 57th, obviously. Having said that, I did see one outlet, I can't remember the name of it, but they had him ranked 13th overall. So obviously he wasn't going to go in the first round, but then again, I don't think anybody expected the Senators to take Tyler Boucher 10th overall. So obviously there was a little bit of a fighting chance that might happen, but I think the Leafs should be really happy with the pick of Matthew Knies. I think he projects as probably a middle 6 winger at the NHL level, a guy who can take some shifts on the first line as well. And Yeah, he wasn't exactly the guy I had in mind on the board at that time. I know there were some guys like Simon Robertson and Jack Barr were still available, but overall, absolutely no complaints about the Knies pick. If he develops the way that the team expects him to, and if he succeeds at the University of Minnesota and gets some minutes in the AHL, I think the Leafs could have a really solid player on their hands, especially someone who can slide in on that third, second line role and provide a bit of a physical presence, but also provide some goal scoring prowess. So I really like the pick overall.
Yeah, I like the size, and he 18 years old. You got a lot of time to build into that frame and add some muscle. So he's already ahead of the game with 6'4" and can build into it. Like the size. Then we had to wait for a long time, for a very long time.
Very.
I don't know what it would have been like for Peter. He would have been like, I'm waiting. All these guys keep on going. But it was round 5. Pick number 153. So Peter, introduce us to that player.
Yeah, 153rd overall was Ty Voit from the Sarnia Sting. More what we expected as a Kyle Dubas pick. He's 5'11", 5'10", 5'11", in that range, 160 pounds, but not the biggest player, but he plays a very big game in terms of trying to expand his size with his balance and try to protect the puck. He's a very crafty playmaker. Very silky smooth mitts. It's hard to get a good gauge on him because he had an up and down rookie season, 28 points, 20 assists, with the Sarnia Sting last year. Would have had an opportunity this year, but there was no OHL season. But at the PBHH Invitational that was set up by a bunch of OHL players, to give prospects an opportunity who didn't get that chance, he was a point per game player with 7 assists and 10 points in 10 games. So if anybody showcased his talents, it was Ty Voit. I'm pretty sure that was probably a selling point, but there was also past history of him with his skill sets, him wanting to go to the gym more, put on a little bit more weight and be ready for when the season comes up. Because if there was a chance where there was a full OHL season, Ty Voit would have been a main producer on the Sarnia Sting, and he probably would have been more than a 5th round, 4th round that I originally had him at 112th on my rankings. Maybe even as a 2nd or 3rd overall player or 2nd or 3rd round player, given the fact that he has some really good upside with the potential that he has to be a good playmaker.
So Peter had him quite a bit higher. Alex, where did this guy suit up for you? Was it a steal in that round?
I think it's a little bit tough to call anybody a steal at this point, because especially for a guy like Ty Voit, he didn't play in the OHL this year. So there's really nothing to scout him on based on this year. I mean, you'd have to look back to his stats last year before COVID shut the league down. Having said that, I know that on most people's rankings, he was supposed to go somewhere in the 3rd, maybe 4th round. And I just like the pick. I mean, it's a typical Dubas pick, like Peter said. And I think he had 28 points in 49 games last year for the Stings. So it'll be really interesting to see how he fares with the Sting this year, assuming the OHL gets back to a normal season and there are no hiccups throughout the whole thing. But I do like the pick a lot. I think it's definitely a safe pick in the 5th round. And he's just one of those guys that you draft. He was probably one of the better players available. You draft him and you hope he turns out. If not, it's not the end of the world. But I do think he has potential to make some noise in the pros.
All right. So let's stay with you then on this one, Alex. A goaltender. The Leafs need some goaltending depth, but this guy's probably 4 or 5 years out from being able to offer that, I would say. It would be nice if it was earlier, but introduce us to, let's see, round 6, number 185, going to the Toronto Maple Leafs.
So I don't have his name in front of me, but I'm going to do my absolute best to pronounce his name without butchering it. I believe it is Vyacheslav Peksa. And he is, all I have to say about this is that it's another goalie prospect. And in my mind, you can never have too many goals. Rick DiPietro, or you could get an Andrei Vasilevsky. I think you just got to have as many options as possible, and Peksa gives them another option like that. He's spent this year in the MHL, which is essentially the Russia's version of the junior league, so it's sort of the version of the OHL, WHL, whatever. And I posted a 909 save percentage and a 256 goals against average, I believe, so decent stats. And he just adds another option to the pool of goalie prospects the Leafs have of Joseph Wall, Arthur Akhtiamov, Ian Scott. They've got some options in between the pipes to work with over the next couple of years. And ultimately that's just what it comes down to for me. You got to take as many chances as possible when it comes to netminders, and Pexa gives him another option. So I don't think there was any issue with taking him in the 6th round.
Right. Yeah. I like what you're saying there with all these goalies in the system now. And the Leafs did extend Joseph Woll a couple days ago as well. I wrote an article on him a few months ago after he stood on his head with 60 saves in a loss, but it was an incredible game. And I'm hoping that's translates to the big roster in the future. But how about you, Peter? Was this goalie on your radar? A good pick for Toronto?
Not even on my radar. A lot of people did not even have him as probably one of the top goaltenders in the league. I know, I believe Future Considerations Hockey didn't even have them in their top 300. So not a whole lot of him is out there. As Alex gave the basic stats, good numbers, but other than that, not really a whole lot to go off of with him, other than the fact that he's got good size and has good athleticism. But at the same time, he is teammates with Arthur Aktiyamov because they are on the same MHL team. So there's that familiarity with him right there. And maybe the Maple Leafs thought that maybe the way that Aktiyamov is improving as a goaltender, maybe they thought they'd take another chance with him with one of their teammates. So the Aktiyamov pick is looking pretty good. He's on a good trajectory with his progression as a prospect. Maybe Pexa can do the same thing. I don't know. I don't know if he's going to have the same upside as Aktiyamov, but we'll see where it goes.
And that's what that draft is all about. It's especially this year, like without having a season for a lot of these guys to show off to the scouts what they've got and another year worth of development. This was really a strange draft to try to figure it out. So, but lucky for us, Toronto didn't have a lot of draft picks, so they didn't have to worry about it.
No 12 picks like there was last year.
Yeah, exactly. We hope you like what you're hearing and seeing right now. This is the Maple Leafs Lounge, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. Follow us on YouTube and on your social media channels, and follow us on your favorite podcast networks as well. We are there. So the other big news out of the league this week was the Seattle Kraken. They're no longer just the logo. They have some players there now that can start to put a face to that franchise. Interesting. That's going to be interesting, but there were a lot of big names that were left there that Ron Francis said, "Meh, they're okay. We're building an AHL roster here." No, it's not an AHL roster, but it's not. They left a lot on the table. However, there's a lot of money they've got right now too that they could bring in some free agents. So maybe that's the plan. I'm not sure, but I do know that they took my guy. I've been wanting Jamie Oleksiak with the Toronto Maple Leafs for months, and they stole him from me, signed him into an extension, and I think it was big. If you look at Seattle's defense, that's a good-looking defense. They need some scoring up front, but that defense looks good to start. I was sad to see Oleksiak go, and I'm going to start with Alex on this one because you guys were both kind of confident that McCann was going to stay. I was a little bit worried that he might be exposed, that he could go, and he did. He got to be with the organization for a couple of days until, catching you up on this. The Leafs acquired McCann from Pittsburgh the day of that you had to have your protected list in place. And then they left him unprotected, and Seattle scooped him. So, Alex, start with that for me. You were very excited that McCann was in Toronto. And were you equally as sad when he was pulled out of Toronto?
Yeah. I mean, this whole McCann thing hit me harder than anybody else. I think I had a Saturday afternoon to kill. And when I read the news that the Leafs had traded for McCann, the first two things I did were, number one, I wrote an article on how much he bolsters the center depth for the Leafs. And number two, I put together a 3-minute highlight reel for my Twitter followers to show the Leafs what kind of player they'd be getting in Jared McCann. And he lasted all of 96 hours in Toronto. So, I mean, Yes, I'm obviously a little upset that he was claimed, because I think he would have been a really valuable addition to the Leafs forward core. I think based on his ability to play center and his ability to kind of double up as a winger and provide some offensive presence on the power play, I think there was really a lot to give there for Jared McCann. But the more that kind of time progresses and the more that I hear Dubas's reasoning about it, the more I understand why they opted to leave him unprotected. And that's simply because they have a lot of faith in Justin Hall. And you can say what you want about Justin Hall, but consider that this season was the first year in, I don't know, in my lifetime anyways. I've been watching the Leafs for 16 years now, and it's the first time in my 16-year fandom of being a Leaf fan that there was never any gripe about the defense. No one, like, there were issues. You know, we had couple holes here and there to plug, but overall the defense was a non-concern for most of the year, and Justin Hall was a big part of that. And realistically, Dubas did have a point there. I mean, Hall is signed for 2 more years at $2 million, and where are you going to find a guy who can do what Justin Hall does on that second pairing for $2 million? Especially when you consider the fact that Zach Bogosian might not even be coming back. That leaves them with TJ Brody as their only option on the right side, who played last year. So I do understand where he's coming from and why he left McCann unprotected. It definitely hurt a little bit extra, because I think, like myself and like Peter and like a lot of Leaf fans, we got attached to the idea of having Jared McCann in Toronto. And I think especially after the way that the playoffs ended, all we wanted was just to have a new face in there. Somebody new, somebody that wasn't on that team that played a part in the choke in Game 7 against Montreal. And it was just, it was unfortunate to see him go, but at the same time, I 100% understand Dubas's reasoning for it. My only concern is that a lot of Justin Hall's positives were brought on by the fact that he was playing with Jake Muzzin. When he wasn't with Muzzin, it was a little bit iffy, but as long as Muzzin stays healthy for most of the year and the Leafs kind of keep that pairing in cements, I think this will end up being a move that'll pay off in the long run.
And granted, you know, when any defenseman doesn't have his regular guy with him, there's a little bit of shakes, right? So, but I get what you're saying there, and I also saw it from not only the protection of Hall, but as Alexander Kerfoot too. They were going to take one of those guys, and I know a lot of people wanted Kerfoot to go. But Kerfoot had an excellent playoffs, and the guy is a $3.9 million contract. He's a great third line center. He moved into the second line when Tavares went down, and he played very well. And sure, he's worth an extra $1 million than McCann, so it would have been nice to get that off the books and have McCann in. But another thing stood in my mind was one of Wayne Simmons' first media interviews that he did after opened. Was that somebody asked him, who sticks out in your mind as a surprise on the team right now? And he said, Kerf. He's like, the guy works, and he's a great teammate, and he works so hard, like just as one of those initial things coming into a team. And that's the guy that he looked at. So it was a chess move by Dubas. He was going to lose one of those two guys, and to still be left with an Alexander Kerfoot isn't a bad deal at the end of the day. But Peter, I know that you really wanted McCann in the blue and white too.
Yeah, because he would serve as a perfect replacement for Zach Hyman and fit into that top six role very well. And the fact that, you know, they got him for only a prospect or even a B-rated prospect and a late round pick was a really great asset or a really great move on Dubas's part. So you essentially give a bit, very little in order to acquire a really good replacement for someone that's already on the way out. And again, like Alex, I can understand the reasoning for him wanting to keep this roster intact, mainly because he does have value in Justin Hall. And as you mentioned, Alex Kerfoot had a terrific playoffs. So maybe Dubas is willing to keep the core together and then use that money as opposed to bringing on a contract in McCann and using that to bolster the offense or even the top six by bringing in possibly a Brandon Saad. I'm not going to say Gabriel Landeskog because that's going to be a lot of money right now, but it was fun while it lasted when we were talking about it last week. But I mean, again, like Alex, I understand where he was coming from as well. I was obviously upset because based on the asset management, McCann would probably be a better replacement over Kerfoot, and to protect Hall in the process, it just didn't quite work out. But hearing his reasoning, yeah, it does make sense. I was upset. I mean, most of Leafs Nation was pretty upset because they had a really viable replacement option. But yeah, I mean, it is what it is. The fact that Dubas still has at least $9 million going into free agency right now to still spread that money out and not dedicated to just one person like Landeskog. He's going to spread that out, and I think that would be probably the wiser option right now.
So let's take that into our next topic here, and it's kind of what does Kyle Dubas do now? We're through the expansion, we're through the entry draft. Free agency is right around the corner, but he doesn't have a ton of money to throw around. There's no big free agent coming. If there is, then I guess they're skating 15 guys a night. I don't know how they're doing it, but like Peter just said, they've got to find some budget players that can over deliver at this point. And there's still some money to get some good players that we've talked about, like a $2 to $3 million type of guy. But the way I'm looking at it, with Hyman gone now, maybe Galchenyuk's not coming back. So there's 2 holes in your top 6 forwards that need to be filled. The third line is together at this point. The fourth line is whatever. But I'm still missing 3 forwards and at least 1 defenseman and a backup goalie. That's what Kyle Dubas needs to figure out in the next coming weeks here. So, Alex, is that shopping list too long to do with the money that is available to the Leafs right now?
I think it's had too long, and just in the sense that I know the Leafs believe that they've got some internal options that they can. I don't know if I don't know if I want to use the word rely on, because I don't think Dubas wants to go into this season relying on some unproven rookies to carry the team to the promised land. But I do think that he has some options that he's confident in that can come in and make a real impact in the lineup. I know that 2 guys that he cited the other day were Nick Robertson and Joey Anderson. Joey Anderson, obviously being the guy that they got back for Andreas Johnsson from New Jersey. He sort of plays a Hyman similar game. He's a very relentless forward, and he's a guy that you can put into the bottom 6 and get some solid production out of. Nick Robertson, I think if you're going to put him in the lineup, I wouldn't be surprised if the Leafs gave him a shot in the top 6 next year, because considering, there are some needs, like you mentioned, Kevin, that they have to address. And I think if you give Nick Robertson consistent minutes in the top 6 with a John Tavares and a Nylander or a Matthews and Marner, I think you could get some solid production out of him in his what would officially be his rookie year. And, I do still think that the option is out there for them to add a real top 6 forward, like a Brandon Saad, like Peter mentioned. But I know that one quote that Dubas had that I took away from his press conference today is he said they were looking to add a different element to their depth forwards. And given that last year they went all in on the veteran leadership, bringing in Simmons and Thornton and guys like that, I would only assume that would mean bring in a little more speed, maybe a little more kind of versatile guys in the bottom 6. And on top of that, obviously finding a backup goalie for Jack Campbell remains a priority, whether that's Frederik Andersen at a discount or whether it's I can't think of anyone off the top of my head right now, but whether it's a guy, say like Yaroslav Halak, if he wants to sign for cheap. And then he also said they were looking to add another Bogosian-like defenseman. So whether that ends up being Bogosian, it could end up just being a big body that can sub out as a 7th defenseman, doesn't have to play every night. I do think that the Leafs have multiple holes that they're looking to fill next week. But having said that, I also think that they've got some internal options they can rely on.
Yeah, this has been boring for the Leafs right now, right? Like everyone's still talking, but the Leafs aren't doing anything because they can't do anything at this point. There's lots of dreaming going on, but not a lot of reality out there. So Peter, that $9 million that you said, is that enough to actually fill out this roster? And I'll take it a step further, at least have it as good as last year, if not better. Or is this a roster that can only go backwards at this point?
That is a really good question. I think Dubas and the cap guru Brandon Pridham know that. They've worked out tougher situations financially before, and I wouldn't surprise me if they figure it out again. If the fact that, Alex mentioned some internal options, you already have one possibly on the 4th line in Adam Brooks. And when Adam Brooks came in too, he was really, really good in that 4C option, playing alongside Thornton and Spezza. So if you have Adam Brooks in that center position alongside Jason Spezza, there's already 2/3 of your 4th line already done. There's also the talk about Kirill Semyonov, who is a KHL signee, 6'1", 176 pounds. There's a possibility that he could take over this fourth line center role. Maybe you shift Adam Brooks to the wing. I don't know what the familiarity is going to be with that. But if you try to allocate the dollars out perfectly, I know that they haven't fully ruled out on an extension to try and sign Nick Foligno. Granted that there has been talk of him wanting to go and play in Minnesota with his brother. It can work. They just need to be very wise about how they're going to spend it and how they're going to allocate it. That was my main talking point in the Gabriel Landeskog situation, where are they going to go after him, or are they going to spend it properly and spread it out? And I think that would be the best decision, because you also have players coming up that are still under $1 million too. You also have the possibility of Timothy Liljegren coming up, who's made really great strides in his progression in his development to be a potential top 4 option that many were citing to replace Justin Hall at one point. So if you ease him in on that third line, and him and Rasmus Sandin had really great chemistry in the AHL with the Toronto Marlies, I think that's a really good stepping point to try and ease his way in, because compared to last season, and I believe he only played in 1 game this year with the Maple Leafs, but Timothy Liljegren looked more comfortable than he did the previous season. So if there's any hope there on the back end to try and give someone some more opportunities, it's going to be Liljegren.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you the truth here, guys, and I will be happy to be wrong, but I don't see this roster being better next year. And the players that are there are going to have to be better, because I don't see the roster being better at this point. I know that sounds kind of backwards, but it's when you look at the fact that they're going back into the division with the Bostons, the Tampa Bays, the Carolinas, like these are big time teams that they've got to go against on a regular basis now, not playing the same 6 teams night in and night out. And we all know that they blew the chance at getting at least to the third round of these last playoffs. And they're losing some pretty key elements here. The Hyman loss, I know that it just couldn't happen. It was too expensive. Anderson loss, well, he was injured, but still on the roster going into last season, it looked better. There's some trouble in paradise right now. I do hope that Dubas has some cards up his sleeve right now, because it's looking a little concerning. And I'm going to roll that into how we start our social media. We've talked a lot on this show about how social media has been so problematic and vicious and toxic. And we've heard Maple Leaf players talk about that. And we saw it front and center when they lost in Game 7, jersey burnings and things like that. I'm sure you guys saw this week, it came out that at least one general manager is saying players don't want to play in Canada anymore. And he's hearing it quite a bit. And citing the taxes, citing social media, and citing the protocols and the border being shut and things like that. I got into a conversation with a few people saying, like, okay, I understand the other two, but are you telling me that social media is easier in the States than it is in Canada? And they were like, yeah, like, you play in Dallas or you play in Carolina, you're not getting roasted. People aren't threatening your family, and that's what we saw. And if you add that in to what's going on with Toronto right now, and the fact that they've got a bunch of gaps to fill, and apparently players are not wanting to come to Toronto or to Canada, that's pretty problematic in my view. Am I a worrywart at this point, guys? Help me out here. Or where are we at?
I'll jump in. I mean, it is concerning because we did see quite a bit of, bashing towards Mitch Marner. At the end of the playoffs, what was said and what was directed towards him on social media was pretty disgusting. And let's face it, I probably would want to come here again if, I was receiving that kind of treatment, because you're being highly regarded. You have this support of your teammates, the general managers. Granted, he made a couple bad errors. It's not something to go out of your way and try and make those kind of comments. It's just absolutely ridiculous. So I don't think you're a worrywart. I think it's just it does play on the minds. I mean, this is a big market, and this team has struggled for years and years and years. And I think the team just wants to try and find some success, given the fact that, you know, all this money's being forked over into 3-4 players right now, and they still can't get it done. I think maybe right now, I think people are just taking it a bit too far. You just need to take a step back, relax, look at Tampa Bay with what they've had. They've had their ups and downs. The Washington Capitals had a lot of ups and downs during the regular season and playoffs. So I think, you know, not to say that history is going to repeat itself for the Maple Leafs, but it has happened in the past. And I think people have just got to remember to keep the faith and don't do anything stupid.
That'd be nice. And when you talk about those things too, we saw it on the flip side. And, you know, a lot can be said about Edmonton and getting Duncan Keith and taking on his entire contract. But the reason that he wanted out of Chicago, where the guy's been an excellent player and is loved in the community, was because of what happened with the border and not being able to see his family and his baby for so long, right? So some interesting things at play here. So Alex, you want to add anything into this one?
Not really. I mean, I think you have some reasonable takes to cause for concern, but at the same time, I think once the pandemic clears up a little bit and maybe some of these restrictions ease with the vaccination rates in Canada and everything, I think that's eventually going to be a non-factor. And, you know, truth be told, I don't really buy the whole social media thing. I think it was really under the microscope this year with obviously Toronto going out the way they did in round 1 against Montreal and Montreal. I mean, obviously the Habs gave their fans a great run, but it's still one of the bigger hockey markets in the NHL, and every move is scrutinized there. So obviously there were probably some mean comments that were kind of amplified there, but I have a really hard time believing that you're not going to get some of the same comments playing in New York with the Rangers, or playing for the Islanders, or playing for Chicago, or playing for any of the bigger markets in the States. I mean, I'm sure if you go to, like you said, Dallas or Arizona or Florida, maybe it'll be a little more tame, but I really don't think the social media is that much of a deal breaker. And in the end, if you're getting a better deal from a Canadian team than any of the American teams, I have a hard time believing the player is going to say no to that because there's a couple extra taxes or because people on social media are a little more relentless. So I think there is a little bit of cause for concern there, but ultimately I don't think it's something that I'd let myself worry about.
This is the Hockey Writers, and this show you are watching is the Maple Leafs Lounge. We do this every week where we get together with writers and talk about stories that we're working on, stories that are affecting the team at this point. And make sure you head on over to the hockeywriters.com and go to that Toronto Maple Leafs tab rather, and check out all of the articles right there. So we're going to do the flip side on this now. We talked about a little bit of the bad of the social media. We always go the opposite way and say the good on the social media this week. And there was lots of good stuff. I encourage everybody, if they have not seen it, because not everyone watches the draft like these two. These two were up watching and tweeting and all crazy about it for the last 2 days. I encourage everyone to find when Luke Hughes was drafted and the celebration by his brother, Jack Hughes. Both New Jersey Devils now. You couldn't tell which guy was drafted because Jack Hughes was just jumping up and down, and I liked how that spread on social media. That was nice to see. And 3 brothers now, all in the NHL. An incredible story is happening there. Peter, what do you got from social media?
Two comments or 2 things that I saw that was really funny. And I really can't remember the name of this, of the tweet. I wish I had my phone with me, but it's charging right now. But it was a picture of SpongeBob and Patrick running outside with the meme, and Squidward is inside. And Alex knows where I'm going with this, where it says Quinn Hughes looking at Jack and Luke, and it's Jack and Luke outside as SpongeBob and Patrick, and then Quinn is Squidward. So I found that really funny, given the fact that meme is just blowing up about people or like we're excluded from one thing, but other people are having fun or something like that. So I just thought that was really funny. and I can't remember what was said exactly about this, but James Duthie tweeted something out about Bob McKenzie not being part of the draft, or it's not the draft without Bob McKenzie. And Bob McKenzie just staring into his camera with his glasses, and he just sips on a margarita just like Bobby Margarita does. So he just looked really badass with that. So I just really thought that was really great.
Nice. Alex?
Yeah, so I've got a funny tweet here that comes from one of my favorite accounts on Leafs Twitter, at Juno the Leafs. He said, sure, teams are trading away excellent young goalies for scraps, swapping first-round picks for Rasmus Ristolainen, but you know what would be way worse? If they had, say, lost Jared McCann in the expansion draft. Surely that would be a cause for true outrage. And I know that kind of contradicts everything that we said and how upset we were about losing Jared McCann, but realistically, we didn't trade, or I guess not we, the Leafs didn't trade a first-round pick for Rasmus Ristolainen. The Leafs did not lose a young goalie, a premier young goalie like Alex Nedeljkovic for a third-round pick. Yeah, losing Jared McCann hurt a little bit, but it could be worse.
It could always be worse, boys. It could always be worse. One I've got to tell you guys, because you know how the old prof hasn't been on the show for a little while. He's got lots on the go. So since that's happened, I've become the elder statesman of the show, and I have to be the mature guiding force of the show at this point for friends here. So I saw this today, this week, and it wasn't completely hockey, but when I saw it, I was like, I've got to tell Peter and Alex about this, and I'm going to make it about hockey. And so I've switched it a little bit, and it says, you think you know stress? When I grew up, if you missed a game, you missed it forever. Do you guys get it? You don't even get it, do you?
I mean, what is just you can't go back and watch the highlights? Was that the joke?
There was nothing.
Yeah.
If you missed the game, you might be able to stay up till 11:30 at night and maybe catch if they did it on the local sports at the end of the show. There was no TSN and Sportsnets and all those things. There was nothing. You guys don't know how lucky you are. Then you couldn't go on YouTube and find it, or on Twitter and be like, oh, I missed that. Oh, there it is. Oh, cool. That happened. No, you missed it forever. Yeah. And then the next day you might look at the game score and be like, oh, well, look at that. Somebody got in a fight. Oh, wonder what happened there.
Yeah.
And you just see like a dash for a goal and a dash for an assist. And it's like, you don't get to see it. Maybe you could wait until the highlight reel on the VHS tape comes out a year later. You guys don't understand. Look at this.
I know.
No,
imagine.
I understand.
Well, you know what
I understand. It's just right now we have I have Leafs TV to watch those old school Maple Leaf games. So it all comes back full circle, I guess.
You know what I think about? Imagine being somebody working at like a diner or at a movie theater or something in the early 50s and missing Bill Barocco's goal to win the Stanley Cup, and you can't rewatch it for another 30 years at least when it's rolling on TV. It'd be the longest awaited highlight reel ever.
Yeah, we're very spoiled now. Everything is at the tip of our fingers at all times, which is good and bad. But when I saw that one, I was like, that is true. You guys don't know what it was like to race home because the show started at 8 and you didn't set the VCR, and you're going to be late and you're going to miss the beginning of the show.
You can't pause and record it like we can on Netflix today. So
no, none of that. But yes, now I've totally aged myself. I really need the old prof back, because I'm getting gray hair as we're talking. But anyway, so it was a great show, guys. Thanks so much for making the time. We hope everyone watching and listening in has enjoyed what was a pretty fun week in hockey. And I know NFL training camps are starting up, which means NHL training camps are about a month, about 5 weeks away, I think, 5 or 6 weeks. And of course, free agency is right around the corner. So guess what? We're going to have lots more to talk about next week on the Maple Leafs Lounge. We hope that you will join us then. And until then, have a fantastic week.